It's the people in any place that make it a good place to be.
This is so wonderful that we are all together. And so grateful for the sustenance of this food.
This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee very much for the chance we have to be together tonight as friends and members of a very unique community at the Graduate Theological Union.
اللهم بارك لنا فيما رزقتنا وقنا عذاب النار, which translates into, oh God, thank you, and we ask you that you bless the sustenance that you provided.
Thank you, God, who is our bread. May all the world be clothed and fed.
The merciful one who opens hands, as it were, and provides sustenance for all. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
I think that religion will not get outdated anytime soon, because the one major issue that everyone faces at some point in their life is about belonging and identity. And religion and spirituality will always be that space that will welcome those questions.
Across the bay from San Francisco is an ecumenical and interfaith center for the study of theology and the education of priests, ministers, and rabbis called the Graduate Theological Union, more usually known by its acronym GTU. The GTU is located just north of the campus of the University of California at Berkeley on a knoll that has come to be known as Holy Hill.
To be 60 years old for the GTU is really quite a milestone. It's an accomplishment. When the GTU started in 1962, it was a daring and bold adventure.
We look around us at the 20th century and we look ahead of us at the 21st century. We try to prepare leaders here who will cite backwards on their beginnings.
I always say it's a miracle on Holy Hill for 9 schools to actually come together and to create another entity that is independent of the member schools to manage the consortial services. That happened in the 60s. And I think that's a miracle that I doubt it will happen again.
4 Protestant seminaries initiated the Graduate Theological Union, and shortly after, John Dillenberger, former director of doctoral studies at Harvard Divinity School, became dean and invited Catholic participation.
Then it developed from there the same principles that allowed the founders of the GTU to bring together Protestants and Catholics and different people of different Christian backgrounds. Then that spread, incorporating over the years centers in schools representing Judaism and Buddhism and Islam and Hinduism, and then most recently last year the Baha'i faith. So it really has been an expansion of the original vision.
So we're very delighted, very happy and honored to be part of GTU. There's all sorts of possibilities, just in terms of the interreligious conversations that can go on, the real recognition of our interconnections, our being able to collaborate together on both scholarly theological enterprises, but also in the religious sphere. So as GTU expands, I think that's just all the more vital that all the various voices of religious people around the world are heard.
The core has always been the same, which is that the more people who are working together the better chance we have of solving the world's problems and learning what it is that we've all come here to do.
Just having that sort of cultural, religious immersion experience, I think you can't buy that.
Creating this environment where you are naturally situated in difference really does open you up to difference of all types, and to really operate with a different level of care, compassion, and investment in communities of difference.
I do have a great experience with one of my neighbors who is an evangelical Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I've been living in the neighborhood for about 17 years, and they've been trying to invite me to the faith every single year, including in the month of Ramadan. Kamal, I know it's coming up. I'm praying for you. So he's very friendly, but very persistent. Until recently, when I visited with him and he was diagnosed with cancer. And he looked at me, he put his hand on my shoulder, he said, "Will you pray for me?" So it was kind of the bonding, the human bonding, despite the religious differences, or maybe not just the differences, the approach to difference.
Yeah.
You know what's fascinating is how the last couple years with COVID brought out the humanity in everyone, this need. I would have people ask, what do Latter-day Saints believe? Because they genuinely wanted to know, not just to become my neighbor, but because everyone was searching for this sense of like, I just want to have a grounding in it. And the more I know about everyone, the more I feel like I can handle some of the hard stuff that's going on.
The Graduate Theological Union helps individuals to see each other as people.
Really talking about people of different religions or different faiths, and how do you harmonize how they work together and help each other.
Even though they hold different religious views, different values, they learn to understand, talk, and work with each other.
Now, if you want to know why I'm interested in interfaith activities, it's because I'm a refugee from Nazi Germany and was personally affected by the struggle or the fight between people of different religions, trying to force one religion on others and pushing people of the wrong religion out. My parents had written each other when my father had escaped to Hungary and my mother was still in Vienna working to get permission to get out. And these were beautiful letters. It took me a while to realize it really was a love story. So it became a very important cause for me. And when I was able to do something, I wanted to be involved with an interfaith organization, and the GTU seemed to me ideal because the GTU trains the future leaders of religions around the world. And to have those people in their formative years studying and working with people from other religions, very important for their growth and their understanding.
The original founders had a vision. It was just at the dawn of the ecumenical era. After the Second World War, there was great ferment among the churches because the churches had failed to stop this horror from happening, and they recognized that, especially in Europe. So this little ecumenical movement was emerging both in Europe and the United States, and the wise founders of the GTU from 4 Protestant denominations created this entity to have dialogue, because they appreciated that before the war, there was no dialogue among the churches. And then in 1967, the Center for Jewish Studies was created. So it went from an ecumenical institution to an interreligious institution pretty quickly. The inclusion of the Jewish Center seems, in hindsight, to have been utterly essential. How could this dialogue be going on in the world without Jews being at the heart of it? Later, as you know, we developed centers for almost all the major world religions, and we are a dynamic and truly interreligious space now.
If I don't hear you, I'm not going to learn from you. And it's not as if your value system or beliefs will be challenged, but it's a way for people to hear you better and understand perhaps their own path, or at least appreciate the path that you've taken.
The ethos is of what I call daily ecumenism. That is that we learn to live with and be aware of and sensitive to the differences among us.
I think that's a big misconception that a lot of people have about interreligious dialogue, is the sense that we're trying to be an ecumenical whole, that we're trying to find this common ground where we're all going to meet here and we're going to put aside our differences and we're all just going to become this one unit. And some people interpret that, especially in the Christian tradition, becoming united in the body of Christ. But really, GTU is all about celebrating differences and being fully present as a practitioner in your tradition, rather than trying to project what you feel like you should be in a non-religious space.
The way I approach religion is as a culture, and that culture shapes our everyday lives. Religion is not just the stuff of a sanctuary. It's like how we eat, how we assemble, how we relate to other human beings, the language that we speak.
I find the entire concept of the Graduate Theological Union a most creative one, in that it brings together different disciplines of various religious denominations under one roof, and yet each one of them able and encouraged to retain their own personal identity and their own personal uniqueness.
I think one of the really important things when we think about history is, what is the lens that we are using? I like to think about a kaleidoscope as an image for thinking about how we tell history. And if we use this kaleidoscope image, every time we shift a perspective, something new comes into view. So I say this because I think the GTU has always had a strong position on social justice issues.
When I went to the GTU, it was a very different place than it is now, and it was a different place than what I returned to.
This is the story of a school for Presbyterian ministers. And because of its unique purpose, a seminary is a little different from the ordinary college or university. It's a graduate school. The students are older, averaging 27 years of age. A majority of them are married. A significantly normal percentage have children. Academic standards are high, competition stiff, the curriculum heavy in subjects you might expect: Bible, church history, ethics, theology, subjects that compel serious scholarship and demand dedicated, high-quality students.
When I came back, there were many LGBT students at PSR. There were courses designed to enhance the gifts of LGBT students. And my husband, Scott Hafner, who was chair of the board of the Pacific School of Religion, and I helped found the Center for Gay and Lesbian Ministry at the GTU, which is a thriving center now for 20 years. The Jesuits unwittingly prepared me to be a leader in San Francisco for the subsequent life that I was called to lead. And I give them enormous credit for that. They educated me, they worked me, they invited me to pay attention to the deeper self that I, and I believe all human beings are.
I chose to study the GTU because I wanted to explore the relationship between God and marginalized populations such as the LGBTQ+ community, specifically in the Catholic Church. The Graduate Theological Union really gave me the tools to have academic discourse at an advanced level in the academy, and that allowed me to have the tools to really research, dialogue about these important questions on inclusivity, and it also allowed me to discern where I want to place these gifts and these tools after I leave. I was very lucky to be able to take courses in different schools inside of the GTU. When I looked around the classroom, there was always diversity, and this wide array of voices and of representation was really edifying to me as a theologian.
Also, the fine weather in the Bay Area encourages students to move from one seminary to another to attend classes.
So we have the proximity geographically to make it possible for students to take courses at all of these different schools and for people to really get to know each other as part of the same community.
But perhaps the most important factor is the cross-registration and library privileges with a major university.
Students at the GTU have the opportunity to take classes at the University of California, Berkeley, which is right across the street.
The enriching effect of both institutions is apparent.
So really good thing about GTU is that GTU allows me to take courses at UC Berkeley. For my case, it is moral psychology in the philosophy department. So my thesis advisor, Dr. Russell, has his motto of creating mutual interaction with the symbol of the Golden Gate Bridge. So just as Golden Gate Bridge connects different two areas, our focus is to bridge theology and science as two distinct areas to find the intersection and find the interdisciplinary dialogue. I believe even in the age of science, theology and philosophy can say more about human free will, consciousness, and responsibility. And that is what I want to study more deeply while I'm studying at GTU.
On behalf of all of you, we are privileged to give this, our common library, the name of a distinguished woman of faith, of compassion, of vision and values, the Flora Lamson Hewlett Library.
The library was the original coming together of the schools. When the schools agreed to put their libraries into one common library.
Part of the credo of the Graduate Theological Union states that it is an ecumenical community of interdependence where a concern for common issues in the church, the synagogue, and society as a whole will foster a new understanding wherein the common and the unique will combine to enrich the lives and work of those who participate in the shared experience.
The library is the center of life. It is the glue that holds everyone together. Even though libraries will change, especially with technology, we will always have our library.
My name is Ngema Wilson Eno. I live and work at St. Teresa's Church, Oakland, as a priest in residence. While undergoing my studies, I am a PhD student in the Sacred Texts and their Interpretation Department. The beauty about studying at the GTU is that I get the opportunity to interact with people whose whose interest is very different from mine. So it's a give and take process, a learning process where I get to know what they are doing and I get to see how what I am doing interacts with what they are doing, a thing I would never have thought of before if not encountering them. So that's a blessing of really studying at the GTU.
I think one of the things that Berkeley offered was that it was incredibly stimulating. I was there in the early 80s. I lived in Berkeley from 1982 through 1985. It was a fascinating time in a number of ways. On the larger campus, it was a time of the anti-apartheid demonstrations, so I frequently went to Sproul Plaza and expressed my own views by lending support to those protests. And I used to have people come from Europe and they would land at SFO, come across the Bay to Berkeley and say, is this a typical city in the United States? And I would say, well, actually, no. It's the only city I know that has its own foreign policy. And it did, quite literally. But it was a place that if you knew who you were, was stimulating in multiple ways. So it helped you, I think, to become creative and to think about things from different perspectives, because you were always talking to somebody who came from a very different background or had a different intellectual framework than you did. That was invaluable. I think it shaped the way that I think intellectually as a scholar, and also the way that I think as an administrator.
I started to think that the only way I could be a person of faith was to be an activist. And I definitely engage in activism, but I was also an artist. That was how I identified, as a writer and sometimes as a poet. And I was so discouraged that I thought maybe I could only be an activist. And then I turned to the prophets, and I think we were reading Brueggemann at the time. And I realized that God used poets all the time to disrupt the world, to change people's ways of seeing, and it gave me so much hope. And I think about CARE, the Center for Art and Religion at the GTU, and I think how important it is that we have a place like that also at the heart of the GTU, because activism and changing the world happens in so many different ways. It has to take all of these different approaches and modalities in order to really make a difference, I think, and to allow people to bring their full selves to it.
The idea of where religion meets the world means that the theoretical and the practical come together, that the world of belief and the world of action come together, that the world of ideas and the world of practical engagements come together.
Hi, how are you doing here? Thank you for volunteering today.
A lot of aspects of our institutions, they just leave certain people out. And I think that it's real important that we are connected with these people, with all people. There is a connection. I think that's the way creation is. There's a connection with our earth, with our people, and it's important that we realize that. And that's what, if something is just academic and intellectual, you can get so caught up in abstract ideas, which are, which it's good, but it has to come into real experience, or, what is the value in it?
Our alumni are not satisfied with staying on top of the ivory tower, waiting for people to come up to the tower. Our alumni decides to go down to the village.
It's so good to see you. Hi. So very, very.
But this is a community maritime learning institute. We have to create value.
Right.
We have to make what we do contributive and additive to something and someone.
Right.
The amount of stress is very, very, very substantial on the ships. Right now, we've got a big crisis going on with the Ukrainian-Russian thing. Even if you're not on a ship with Russian and or Ukrainian seafarers, or you're not from those countries, just the idea that this war is going on and we are out here in the middle of the sea sitting ducks if anybody wants to kill us. A seafarer was killed in the Black Sea 2 weeks ago. And that shook the entirety of the seafaring world worldwide. And so it's very, 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 very tense. And when we go on ship now, they're very, very, very uptight. But yeah, we really feel fortunate to be here to help, to see all of these global things going on. And then that comes to our doorstep, and we're privileged to be in a position to help. We really are. The GTU has and always had a international, interfaith, and global perspective of expanding our idea of religion beyond personal and private worship, or as a sacred activity over against secular activity.
Yeah, our motto.
Absolutely.
Where religion meets the world.
Where religion meets the world.
One of the things that we do is to ritualize a disruption in something. I think about, we're at right now, Ukraine's war, other elements that are shaping the world. But how do we by and large, we can move on with our daily lives. Right. So, and that's, I think, part of what we have to rethink. How does that disruption of our everyday happen in some way when we're much more distributed, much more spread out, because otherwise we just, what I'm saying, like the ability to stop and be together, to disrupt the routine of our lives and to be in the presence of each other in whatever way that happens.
In the Mission District of San Francisco, several Catholic seminarians occupy an apartment away from the GTU seminary cluster.
One of the things that I think that we've learned that when we study theology, it's not just studying out of a textbook what this God is. I think we realize that this God, whatever that is, exists in community where people live, particularly where there is poor and struggling people. And we learn a lot just by being in this community.
The intention of people is really matters, but by itself alone is not enough. The impact of what people say to others or do, or sometimes what they don't say and they don't know matters. Yeah. And sometimes it matters more than the individual intention. It's how others feel and receive you and receive what we say. If we are not being able to penetrate to wherever the hurt is, so we're speaking out of ivory tower sometimes, or we are becoming irrelevant to their needs. So engagement with the community requires us, individuals and an institution, to always be with the people. So we are not just teaching in the classroom, we're teaching in the community as well.
So it was at 1992 where I sort of had a conversion experience where I say that I woke up from my pious stupor, where my faith was very inward, looking at my own piety, how I'm practicing my faith, to looking outside, what is happening to my neighbors. Obviously, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of creating a beloved community is still a dream, unrealized. And I know that, one of our faculty, Dr. Valerie Miles-Trubel, is working on a project with our doctoral student, Aaron, on a project that's very close to, Martin Luther King's dream of creating the beloved community. I think it's called Toward Justice.
He was very much not even a pioneer as much as a radical voice in the 60s. But then when we look at our sacred texts, Jesus was a radical voice. I mean, we look at our prophetic literature, they're radical voices.
That's right.
So that our argument has been, in all of the talks that we have given, is that we need to get back to that radical voice, because it has been, dampened down to a level of so-called respectability in respectability politics.
This idea of the church in Black Lives Matter times, how the meaning of that's something that has to be confronted. We have young people who aren't even thinking about the church as a place of safety anymore.
Right. Do you realize how much of a historical time we are living in right now? I mean, when I look this morning at a Supreme Court justice being considered, when we look globally at a potential start of a third world war, when we look at this whole dynamic of our younger generations being the groundswell of a new movement in Black Lives Matter times. When we look at theological pedagogy and the way that we're trying to teach theological students no longer to be docile servants, but to be outspoken leaders and change agents. We are in some heavy duty times.
Oh my God.
You know?
Yeah.
And the fact that we're living this.
Yeah.
We're living this.
Yeah.
And so whatever we do or say, and that's my point of the talk, whatever we do or say, we can't be afraid to speak because it could make a difference beyond what we ever see.
That's right.
I live in the world of secularity, and a lot of friends say to me, why are you serving on the board of the Graduate Theological Union? But it seems to me that it's a place that pulls together many of the things that have compelled me in my life. Spirituality being first and foremost, which is an offshoot of religion, but an essential offshoot. My work in social justice, my work with individuals as a psychotherapist, all seem to be addressed by the dynamic of the GTU. I think that the enormous problems in the world, so many of them have grounding in religion. Religions pitted against one another, and we have this place in which individuals from all over the world come together from religious traditions that seem not to be speaking elsewhere, and we have enormously profitable, and I would say sweet dialogue at the GTU between religions. And to me, it's a model for how the world might someday evolve, and we're a part of that evolution.
The Madrasa Midrasha program was founded 10 years ago because I think of the organically emerging understanding on the part of the community of the Center for Islamic Studies and the Center for Jewish Studies that our traditions intersect and diverge in really rich and unpredictable ways. And to activate that intuition we had about each other's communities and programs.
We intentionally endeavor to provide those intimate spaces where we can have difficult, uncomfortable conversations with friends, and we can voice our concern amongst friends. And that is for me a building block to be able to then curate a model that can take this out into the larger community.
As we're wrapping up here, I keep thinking about this notion of love. That so much of scholarship is an act of love. That thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And knowing that the more time we take to get to know each other and to learn of other traditions and to step outside our own comfort zones, it is an act of love, and we walk away more desirous to love others. And then that shows up in the activism that goes beyond the classroom. We are fostering a brotherhood, sisterhood, a family that is dedicated to loving their neighbors in the most practical way possible.
An act of love, I think religion will always give us that window to finding that we are loved as well. Right. Yeah. That we are loved, that there is someone who cares, or something that cares, some force that cares. There will always be things that we don't understand, that we cannot explain, that we don't have answers for. And spirituality will give us that space, if not the answers, but at least the space to address those questions and to have those conversations, to wrap our minds around the unfathomable. And even for people who like to call themselves spiritual but not religious, what will always be appealing is that there is so much about ourselves as individuals, as persons, our planet, our multiverse, our environment, There is so much about being in this place that has to do with the unseen than the seen. And when you're in the realm of the unseen, you are engaging with some sort of religion or spirituality.
I have a colleague who was a dean of a school just down the street, the School of the Environment. His name was Gus Speth. And in a BBC radio broadcast, he said, I used to think that the greatest problems that we face in terms of the environment were the loss of biodiversity, deforestation, and climate change. He said, I thought we could solve those with 30 good years of science, but I was wrong. The greatest problems we face are greed, apathy, a lack of initiative to actually address the problems that we know exist. We scientists don't know how to do that. And I would say to Gus and to others, that's what religion can do. Religion can motivate people and move them to act in interests that transcend maybe their own personal interests to a broader communal interest. And that's what I think needs to happen, not within the framework of one religion or two, but across the board. And that's what I think the GTU offers, is a chance to think across the board and address those issues.
But we're just getting going. The first 60 years have been adventurous, have been experimental, have been really eye-opening for those who come here and for the world, as people have been impressed by what's possible when you get people from different perspectives together.
The most exciting thing about the GTU is the potential of this place that it is in the act of realizing every day.
I'd like to say a special word of thanks to all those who make the GTU happen. The GTU, as I've come to experience it, is a miracle. I've been hearing this from other people, but now I understand the GTU is a miracle. How it survives, how it continues to thrive, is all a grace. So I'd like to thank all the people who are behind it, behind the scenes, people who do not see, the benefactors, those who make the funds, the different funds available. I'd like to say a big word of thanks to them and to let them know that the legacy they are building is going to reach generations upon generations and the ends of the earth.